I'm back with another video. Today's video is rather different from any other video that I've done before, since this is a list on what I think are the top 8 best albums of 2020. Sure, we all know that 2020 is the worst year ever. Hell, it's even more of a shitstorm than the previous 10 years combined. The previous 10 years were all fucking horrible. There's a lot of reasons as to why 2020 was the worst, such as the pandemic, the orange terrorists fucking everything up, the riots that took place, political correctness becoming even more of a problem, the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope being delayed once again, the collapse of the Arecibo telescope, various celebrities and YouTubers destroying their own reputations, concerts being cancelled, car shows being cancelled, movies getting delayed, and other fucked up shit. However, that fucking nightmare of a year we've all suffered through is over. Though it has given us a number of great rock and metal albums from various artists. Today I'm going over what I think are the top 8 best albums of 2020. The reason why this is the top 8 instead of the top 10 is because I didn't obtain every rock or metal album that was released in 2020. So we're going to have to work with what we've got. This list does have a few rules, however. First of all, this list is strictly for studio albums, meaning no live, compilation, remix, or greatest hits albums will be considered. This also means that EPs will also be excluded. Second, if I don't own the album, then I unfortunately can't include it. Third, this list is limited to one artist per entry, so keep that in mind. One more thing is that this list is entirely opinionated. No, not everyone will agree with this list, but we all have different opinions. Just a heads up, I've already reviewed some of these albums, so I'll try to be brief when discussing the ones I've already reviewed. Anyways, let's go on with the top 8 best albums of 2020. Number 8, Ghost 5 and 6 from 9 Inch Nails. I've already talked about these albums back in May of last shitty year. Or maybe it was back in March, whatever. Anyways, I'm going to include a link to my review in the description. The reason why both these albums are being included is because I really like how they sound. And I couldn't decide which album I like more, because I decided to include both of them in the same entry. These albums are great, but also pretty underrated in my opinion, since they didn't get a whole lot of attention. Now, number 7, Perdita from Stone Temple Pilots. This album came out back in February of last shitty year. It's actually the first STP album to be fully acoustic. I just think it's pretty interesting move right there. I'm going to talk more about this album in further detail when I eventually review the material from Stone Temple Pilots, whenever that day comes. Now, number 6, Throws of Joy and Jaws of Defeatism from Napalm Death. This is Napalm Death's most recent album. Actually ended up on Loudwire's list of the best rock and metal albums of 2020. And rightfully so, because of how fucking awesome this album is. It's also the first studio album from Napalm Death since 2015. And I will talk about the material from Napalm Death once I get the rest of their albums. It might be unusual to feature a grindcore album immediately after talking about an album that touched upon soft rock and acoustic rock. But there's plenty of other lists that do that. Now, number 5 is Amends from Grey Days. This is the most recent album from Grey Days. In my opinion, this band is very underrated. And a friend of mine thinks that Grey Days are very unique in a way. There are a lot of people involved with this project. And there's going to be a link in the description to my review of this album. I remember Rolling Stone magazine they had described this album as, quote, the long-lost material from Chester Bennington. And I personally think this is a fine addition to the list, and it's certainly an album that I highly recommend. Now, number 4 is Matrifugy from Tala. So we have a debut album on the list. Now, Tala are actually the most recent they're the most recent band to be featured on this list, since they've only been around since 2018. I'm gonna be honest and say that this is the most disturbing album that I've ever reviewed. You'll see why since there's a link to my review in the description. At the same time, I also think that this is one of the best albums of 2020. Now, the album's concept is interesting, albeit very disturbing, and it's definitely worth listening to. Number 3, right in the home stretch, and this spot goes to The Kingdom from Bush. I was trying to decide between numbers 3 and 4, but I made my decision for writing the script. Anyways, I already reviewed this album, and there's going to be a link in the description to my review. In my review, I describe this album as being Bush's heaviest album yet. It may not be their best work, but I do find it to be fucking awesome they decided to work with Tyler Bates when making this album. It's definitely worth listening to, especially if you're a Bush fan like myself. Now, number 2. We're almost at the end, and the spot goes to Ohms from Deftones. This is Deftones' most recent album, and by far the heaviest album that they've ever done, thanks to the fact that Stephen Carpenter isn't rocking that 9-string guitar when this album was being recorded. It's not a bonus, Deftones ended up working with their original producer, Terry Date, for the first time since 2008. I will go into further detail into this album when I start reviewing the albums from Deftones after I'm done making this video. One more thing I'd like to mention is that Loudwire selected this as their pick for the best album of 2020. I do agree that this is one of the greatest albums of 2020, but there is one other album that I think is even better. You can probably guess what it is. Now, before we get to number 1, let's have an honorable mention. Live in Tampa from Bush. If this list wasn't limited to just studio albums, then this album would have made the list. It is a great live album, and it was actually recorded at a concert that I actually attended back in August of 2019. And there's going to be a link in the description to my review. Now that's out of the way. It's going on with my number 1 pick. And you probably guess what it is. Number 1, Gigaton from Pearl Jam. What other album could I have gone with? Sure, I could have picked Ohms from Deftones, but something about this album actually made me choose it over Ohms. This is the first studio album from Pearl Jam since the shitstorm that was 2013. And it's definitely worthy of the number 1 spot. This album does have a lot of experimentation, and the song Dance of the Clairvoyants sold me on this album before the album was even released. I will review the material from Pearl Jam someday, but I need to get the rest of their albums first. And those are my picks for the top 8 best albums of 2020. I know I didn't include the new albums from Marilyn Manson, Ozzy Osbourne, Smashing Pumpkins, or Body Count, but that's because I don't own those albums at this time. Or at least not the time of making this video. I will get them eventually. Anyways, this is my first video of the year, and there's going to be more reviews coming this year. We also have new albums coming this year from artists such as Foo Fighters, Weezer, and Garbage. And I'm pretty sure the next albums from Rise Against and Fear Factory will be coming out this year as well. We'll get a hold of those albums, so look out for that. Now, this is the part where I question you. What are your picks for the best albums of 2020? Are you excited to hear the new rock and metal albums that 2021 has in store for us? Let me know in the comments. If you like the video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Be sure to hit the notification bell to notify of future uploads. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon with another review.